let's talk a bit about Pan-Africanism, because it was so important to Nkrumah, to Ghanaian independence, and your own ideas. Now, I mean, Garvey was not the first Pan-Africanist, but I mean, some listeners may not even know who Garvey was, but Marcus Garvey was probably the most important Black leader in human history. I mean, his organization...
That's right.
...was millions and millions of people around the world in almost every country where Black people were.
That's right.
Caribbean and Africa and England and the United States. He was huge, and one of his important... I mean, people call it the Back to Africa movement, and that's not
absolutely.
Yeah,
but it's more than that. Yes.
Exactly,
yes.
exactly. And one of the things he said about Africans abroad, right, with regard to relation to the ancestors and cousins on the continent, was that if Africa, the continent, was not free and independent and had dignity, there is no way that Africans outside of Africa could have that personal sense of dignity if there was the shame at home.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And incidentally, in Kwame Nkrumah's autobiography, he says that the book that had the most influence on him was the philosophy, the opinions. Is it the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey?
Yeah.
So he acknowledged Garvey's impact on him.
Oh yeah,
the most. He said of all that he read, that was what really had a strong effect on him, and it must have to a large extent shaped his views. So we even have had immediately after independence a Black Star shipping line.
That's
we had a fleet of ships
and just
vessels.
And you know that the Black Star Line was Marcus Garvey's shipping line from the 1920s, I believe it was.
Sure.
Right.
So that idea of self-reliance,
exactly.
African self-reliance, Africans abroad and those at home in the continent coming together to work together to develop, and to progress.
Right.
That is the idea of Pan-Africanism, that we need to find a way to work together to regain our dignity, our full dignity and better quality of life. Together. We can only achieve that if we work together. So you are absolutely right about Marcus Garvey and his influence. I think we all need to read him and study him.
Yeah, and I believe your father would have. I believe your father met Carlos Cook when he was in Harlem, when your father was living in the States, and Carlos Cook was kind of like the torchbearer after Garvey died in the United States, and after Garvey was deported from the States.
Right.
Carlos Cook carried the torch in the United States for a long time. Then later, I mean, Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam and Malcolm X and Louis Farrakhan, they carry that torch in their own way because it was economic independence and so forth. Yeah, and so your father was an embodiment of that for the African continent, which was, the linchpin of it all. Because Africans cannot be free in America or England or the West Indies fully without Africa itself being redeemed.
It's directly linked. Even the civil rights movement, it gained strength and inspiration from independence, from Ghana's independence and African countries gaining independence. If you listen to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, Birth of a Nation, I mean, Google it and listen to it. He was in Ghana on the eve of independence, and he was so inspired by the enthusiasm and the atmosphere, so he went back and gave that sermon, Birth of a New Nation.
Yeah.
So even the conditions of Africans in the States, that was to a large extent influenced by what is happening, was happening at the time.
Exactly.
In the mother continent.
Malcolm X constantly referred to it. Yeah.
So our futures, our destinies are together. the same way that today, Africa will find it very difficult to develop without the total involvement and participation in that development by Africans everywhere, not just in the States, but everywhere. You see?